We think it's time for you to sign the house over to us. Just walk away.
You want me to just
Give it to you? Eat out.
Okay.
When my daughter told me to go away after what she did to me, I just smiled and said, okay. What she didn't know was that I had already made a single phone call that would unravel her entire comfortable world. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and if you've ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love, let me know in the comments where you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Catherine, and at 58 years old, I thought I understood what family meant. I thought, after raising 2 children and navigating decades of life's ups and downs, that I knew the fine, delicate line between supporting your children and dangerously enabling them. I was wrong about so many things. But I was absolutely, painfully right about one thing. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the very ones for whom you have sacrificed everything. It's a bitter truth, one that settles in your bones and makes you question every choice you ever made, every gift you ever gave, every sleepless night you ever spent worrying about their happiness over your own. You see, a mother's love is a powerful, blinding force. It compels you to build bridges for your children, to lay down your own comfort and security as paving stones so their path will be smoother than yours ever was. You do it gladly without a second thought. But you never imagine that one day, your own child will be standing on the other side of that bridge you built, telling you to get out of their life and then trying to burn the whole thing down behind you. My story really began on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because I had just finished my morning coffee and was settling in with the newspaper when my phone rang. My daughter Olivia's name flashed on the screen, and my heart did that familiar little skip it always did when one of my children called. After 28 years of being a mother, you'd think I'd get used to it, but every call still felt like a small, unexpected gift. Olivia was 26, my eldest, and for the last 3 years, she had been living in the house I'd bought for her family. Not renting from me, living. I had purchased the 4-bedroom colonial in the beautiful Maple Heights suburb outright. I put the deed in my name, took on the mortgage, and handled the payments every single month. $2,400 transferred from my account to the bank like clockwork on the first of every month for 3 years running. It wasn't easy on my retired teacher's pension, let me tell you. It meant my own budget was stretched paper thin. But what mother wouldn't do anything to give her daughter's family a stable, beautiful life? The house was perfect for Olivia, her husband David, and my 2 precious grandchildren, 7-year-old Leo and 4-year-old Mia. It had a white picket fence, a big backyard, and was in one of the best school districts in the state. It was everything I had dreamed of providing for my own daughter, but could never afford when she was growing up. Back then, we'd lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment where the walls were so thin you could hear the neighbors arguing about unpaid bills. I was determined that my grandchildren would have something better. I wanted them to have stability, a place where their roots could grow deep, a home they never had to worry about losing. So when Olivia and David were struggling to qualify for a mortgage, after David's credit took a hit during a period of unemployment, I stepped in. It wasn't a simple co-signature. I liquidated the bulk of my retirement savings for the down payment, took out a second loan against my own modest home, and made it happen. I put my entire financial future on the line to build a foundation for theirs. "Hello, Mom." Olivia's voice sounded strained when I answered, immediately putting a knot in my stomach. The warmth was gone, replaced by a tense formality. "Can you come over? We need to talk about something important." My hand tightened on the phone. In my 58 years of experience, conversations that started with "we need to talk" rarely ended with good news. They were the preamble to bad grades, car accidents, and broken hearts. But this was my daughter, my firstborn. The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, her small body trembling, and whisper that I was the bravest person in the entire world. How could I ever say no to her? Of course, sweetheart, I said, forcing a cheerful tone. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, she said quickly, too quickly. The words were a flimsy shield, and I could hear the anxiety crackling underneath them. Just come over when you can, we'll be here all day. I threw on my coat, my mind already a whirlwind of possibilities, as I drove the 15 minutes to Maple Heights. What could be so important? My thoughts naturally drifted to the best case scenarios. Maybe David had finally gotten that promotion he'd been hopping for at the accounting firm. Maybe after 3 years of my support, they were finally in a position to start taking over the mortgage payments, just like we had always discussed. The thought made a proud smile touch my lips. It was all I had ever wanted for them, to use my help as a springboard, not as a permanent safety net. Or maybe my heart gave a little flutter. Maybe Olivia was pregnant again. She was only 26, and while a third child would certainly be a handful, the thought of another grandchild to spoil filled me with a warmth that pushed back against the cold knot of dread in my stomach. I allowed myself to hope. I chose to believe that this serious conversation was the beginning of a new, more independent chapter for them, a chapter I had sacrificed so much to help them write. The house looked beautiful, as always, when I pulled into the driveway. The lawn was perfectly manicured, a lush green carpet, thanks to the landscaping service I also paid for every month. The exterior had been freshly painted last spring, a warm cream color that Olivia had picked out from a dozen different swatches. I'd written the check for that too, just as I had for the new roof the year before, and for the set of high-end stainless steel kitchen appliances Olivia had insisted they desperately needed. I walked up the path and rang the doorbell, even though Olivia had told me a dozen times I didn't need to. This was her home, her family's space, and I respected that boundary, even though my name was the only one on the deed. David answered the door, and something in his expression immediately put me on high alert. The easy, grateful smile he usually had for me was gone, replaced by a strained, uncomfortable grimace. He avoided my eyes as he stepped aside to let me in. David was a good man, and he had always been almost painfully appreciative of everything I'd done for his family. Today, he looked like a man being forced to witness a crime he was powerless to stop. Olivia was sitting on the living room couch, the one from the expensive furniture set I'd helped them buy, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. The children were nowhere to be seen. That was the most unsettling part. Normally, my arrival was met with a happy stampede of little feet and shouts of "Grandma." Today, there was only a heavy, anxious silence. "Where are the kids?" I asked, settling into the armchair across from them, the plush fabric another reminder of a check I had written. "They're upstairs playing," Olivia said, her voice tight. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Mom," she began, not meeting my eyes, "we need to discuss the house situation." My heart started beating faster, but it was with pride, not fear. Here it comes, I thought. After all this time, after all my help, they're finally ready to stand on their own 2 feet. Mark must have gotten that promotion. "I've been thinking about our arrangement," Olivia continued, her eyes still fixed on her tightly clasped hands. "And I think it's time for some changes. David and I have been talking, and we feel like the current setup isn't working for anyone." I nodded encouragingly, a warm wave of pride washing over me. I understood completely. They were young adults, parents themselves. They wanted the dignity and pride that comes with true homeownership, not the feeling of living on a handout, however generously it was given. I had been wondering when this conversation would come, and honestly, I was so proud of them for being the ones to initiate it. "What kind of changes did you have in mind?" I asked, my voice full of warmth and support. "Are you ready to start taking over the payments? We could work out a gradual transition, if you like. You could take on a little more each month until you're covering everything." Olivia finally looked up, and the nervous, hesitant expression was gone. It was replaced by something cold and hard that I had never seen on her face before. A flicker of something that looked unnervingly like resentment. "That's not exactly what we had in mind, Mom," she said, her voice flat. "We think it's time for you to sign the house over to us. Completely transfer the deed and just walk away." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. I stared at my daughter, certain I had misunderstood, that my ears were playing a cruel trick on me. "Excuse me," I whispered, my own voice a stranger's. "You want me to give you a house worth $400,000. You want me to just give it to you?" "You've been making the payments anyway," Olivia said, her voice taking on a sharp, defensive edge as if I were the one being unreasonable. "It's not like this would change anything for you financially. You just stop making the payments you're already making." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the logical, intelligent daughter I had raised with the person speaking to me now. "But I would also lose a $400,000 asset," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Olivia, sweetheart, I have put my entire financial future into this house. My retirement savings, the loan against my own home, everything. This house is my security for when I can't work anymore." David shifted uncomfortably beside her, his gaze fixed on the floor. He knew. He knew what they were asking was monstrous. But Olivia's expression only hardened. The soft, nervous girl from moments ago was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "Mom, you're being dramatic," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "You have your teacher's pension, you have your own house, you don't need this too. And honestly, it would mean a lot to us to actually own our home, instead of feeling like we're just borrowing it from you." The manipulation in her words was so blatant, it was almost breathtaking. She was trying to make me feel guilty for not wanting to bankrupt myself for their convenience. She was twisting my generosity into a weapon, making it seem like I was the one burdening them by providing them with a free house. But there was something else in her tone, a chilling undercurrent that made my skin crawl. It was pure, unadulterated entitlement, as if she deserved this house, as if, after everything I had already given, I still owed her more. "Olivia," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to appeal to the reasonable daughter I thought I knew. "I understand wanting to own your own home. But what you're asking me to do would leave me with nothing. I would have no savings, no major investment, no safety net for my old age. I would be completely dependent on my pension, which, as you know, barely covers my basic expenses as it is." I laid out the stark, simple truth of my financial reality, hoping it would break through to her. It didn't. "That's not our problem, Mom." The words were spoken with such cold, flat indifference that the mask of my loving daughter slipped away completely, revealing the face of a stranger underneath. "You chose to buy this house," she continued, her voice gaining a hard, accusatory edge. "You chose to put yourself in this position. We never asked you to do that." The cruelty of the lie, the sheer audacity of it, took my breath away. This was my daughter. The little girl I'd rocked to sleep every night. The teenager I'd worked 2 jobs to help put through college. The young woman whose tearful pleas for help had convinced me to sacrifice my own financial security. "But you did," I whispered, the memory so clear it felt like yesterday. "You begged me to help when you couldn't get approved for a mortgage. You cried on the phone. You said it would just be temporary, just until you both got back on your feet." "That was different," Olivia snapped, dismissing the past with a wave of her hand. "That was an emergency. This is about what makes sense now. David and I have decided we want full ownership. And frankly," she added, her voice dripping with disdain, "it's weird having my mother own the house we live in. It makes us feel like children." I felt something shift inside me then, a profound and permanent change, like a heavy door slamming shut in a place I could never access again. For 3 years, I had watched them live comfortably in a house they couldn't afford, and not once had either of them ever truly acknowledged the sacrifice I was making. Olivia, I said quietly, my voice devoid of the warmth it had held just minutes before. I need you to understand something. I have paid $72,000 in your mortgage payments over the past 3 years. That's not including the down payment, the closing costs, the new roof, the landscaping, or any of the other expenses. I have personally invested nearly $200,000 of my own money into this house. So, Olivia's voice was getting louder now, more aggressive, all pretense of a civil conversation gone. That was your choice. Nobody forced you to do any of that. You're right, I said, standing up from the chair, a cold, unfamiliar resolve hardening inside me. Nobody forced me. I did it because I loved you and I wanted to help your family. But what you're asking me to do now isn't love, it's theft. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and true. Olivia's face flushed a deep, furious red. Theft? Are you kidding me right now? This is your daughter asking for help and you're calling it theft. No, I said calmly. This is my daughter demanding I give her a $400,000 house for free after I've already invested my life savings in her comfort. There is a difference. David finally spoke up, his voice weak and pleading. Mrs. Patterson, maybe we could work out some kind of payment plan. We could pay you back over time. Olivia whirled on him with a fury that made me take an involuntary step back. Don't you dare take her side, David. We talked about this. We agreed this was the best solution for our family. The best solution for your family, I corrected, not for mine. Olivia, what you're asking is impossible. Then you're being selfish, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. After everything we've been through, you can't even do this one thing for your own daughter. That's when something in her expression changed completely. The mask of the entitled daughter fell away, and what was left was pure, unadulterated rage. Fine, she hissed, her voice cold as ice. If that's how you want to be, then you should just leave. She stepped closer to me, her face twisted and ugly. Go away. The words were a poisoned dart, my own daughter telling me to go away from the house I had bought her. But it was what happened next that changed everything. She shoved me hard, with both hands flat against my chest. I stumbled backward, my hip catching the sharp corner of the coffee table. A bolt of white-hot pain shot through my body as I gasped, struggling to keep my balance. Olivia, David shouted, jumping up from the couch. What are you doing? But she wasn't finished. She shoved me again, harder this time. My feet tangled beneath me, and I fell backward onto the hardwood floor, my head hitting with a sickening, hollow crack. Stars exploded behind my eyes, and I tasted the sharp, metallic tang of blood in my mouth. Get out, Olivia screamed, standing over me, her mother, as I lay on the floor of the house I was paying for. Get out and don't come back, we don't want you here. David was beside me instantly, his face pale with shock as he helped me sit up. Mrs. Patterson, are you okay? He pleaded before turning to his wife. Olivia, what is wrong with you? But Olivia had already turned away. She didn't offer a hand, she didn't gasp in horror. She just stood there with her back to me, dismissing the mother she had just assaulted as if I were nothing more than an unwelcome intruder. I sat there on the floor of her immaculate living room, my head throbbing, my hips screaming in protest, and felt something fundamental break inside me. Not my bones, though they hurt plenty, something deeper. The veil of a mother's love, the one that had been holding me back from seeing the ugly, undeniable truth about who my daughter had become, was finally violently torn away. David helped me to my feet, his hands gentle and profoundly apologetic. I'm so sorry, he whispered, his eyes filled with shame. I don't know what's gotten into her lately. But I knew exactly what had gotten into her. Entitlement, a poison that had seeped into her soul so deeply it had crowded out everything else. Gratitude, respect, love. The belief that everything I'd given her was simply owed to her, that my sacrifices were her right, and that my love was something she could take for granted and throw away when it became inconvenient. "I'll be fine," I told David, my voice raspy as I straightened my clothes. "I need to go home now." Olivia didn't even look at me as I gathered my purse and walked, limping slightly, toward the door she had just ordered me out of. She'd already dismissed me, already moved on. As I reached the front door, I paused and turned back one last time. She had told me to go away. Fine, I would go away. But not in the way she expected. I looked at the back of my daughter's head, and a small, cold smile touched my lips, a smile she couldn't see. "Okay, sweetheart," I said quietly into the tense silence of the room. "I'll go away." What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend in her fit of entitled rage, was that I'd already made the phone call. The one that would change everything. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind replaying the sickening crack of my head hitting the floor. The metallic taste of blood was still in my mouth, and every time I instinctively touched the tender spot on the back of my head, my fingers came away sticky. My own daughter had put her hands on me, shoved me to the ground in the house I was paying for, and screamed at me to get out like I was a criminal. But what hurt more than the throbbing pain in my head and my hip was the cold, hard realization of what Olivia had become. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This wasn't stress talking. This was calculated cruelty from someone who felt so profoundly entitled to my sacrifice that she saw my refusal to continue it as an act of aggression worthy of a physical assault. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, I just sat in the car for 10 minutes, staring at my modest two-bedroom house. The paint was peeling around the windows. The front steps were starting to sag. I had been putting off my own maintenance for 3 years to make sure Olivia's mortgage was always paid on time. My own home, my own security, was slowly deteriorating while I poured every spare penny into hers. I walked inside and went straight to the bathroom mirror. The reflection that stared back was a stranger. A purple bruise was already blooming on my left cheekbone where I'd hit the floor, and there was a small, ugly patch of dried blood matted in my hair. I looked like a victim of domestic violence, which I realized with a sick, twisting feeling in my gut was exactly what I was. I cleaned the wound as best I could, my hands still trembling, then I sat down at my own kitchen table with my laptop. The rage had subsided, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. There were things I needed to do, calls I needed to make. But first, I needed to see the full scope of the betrayal in black and white. I pulled up my bank statements and started calculating. $72,000 in mortgage payments over 3 years. $25,000 for the down payment and closing costs. $8,000 for the new roof last summer. $12,000 for the stainless steel kitchen appliances. $4,000 for the landscaping service. $3,000 for the living room furniture. $6,000 for various repairs and maintenance over the years. The total was staggering, $130,000. I stared at the number on the screen. I had spent $130,000 on Olivia's family in 3 years. And today, she had shoved me to the ground and told me to get out. But the mortgage payments were just the beginning. I started thinking about the opportunity cost, the phantom wealth I had sacrificed. If I had invested that $72,000 in a simple index fund instead of paying for Olivia's perfect life, it could have grown substantially over the past 3 years. Instead, I was living paycheck to paycheck on my meager teacher's pension, while my daughter lived in a luxury I had funded and was now being violently ejected from. The injustice of it all was a physical weight on my chest. I opened a new browser window and searched for the phone number of the mortgage company. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard for a fraction of a second, but then I remembered Olivia standing over me as I lay bleeding on her floor, screaming at me to get out. The hesitation vanished. The phone rang 3 times before a cheerful, professional voice answered. Mortgage Services, this is Jennifer speaking. How can I help you today? Hello, Jennifer, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My name is Catherine Patterson, and I need to discuss my account. The property address is 1247 Maple Heights Drive. Certainly, Mrs. Patterson. Can you please verify your social security number for me? I provided the information, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm against my ribs as I prepared to say the words that would set everything in motion. Thank you for verifying, Jennifer said. I can see your account here, Mrs. Patterson. Your payment is actually ahead of schedule, which is wonderful. What can I help you with today? The irony was so thick, I almost laughed. I need to cancel the automatic payments effective immediately, I said, and I want to discuss my options for the property. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. I see, Jennifer said, her voice now more cautious. Are you experiencing financial hardship? We have several programs that might be able to help. No financial hardship, I said, my voice getting stronger with every word. I am choosing to stop making payments on a property where I am no longer welcome. A longer pause this time. I understand, she said finally. I will need to transfer you to our account management department, but I can stop the automatic payments for you right now if you'd like. Yes, I said, please do that immediately. Done, she confirmed. Your automatic payment scheduled for next week has now been canceled. Now please hold while I transfer you to someone who can discuss your other options. As the hold music started playing, a tinny, soulless tune, I thought about Olivia. She would probably assume this was just an empty threat, a temporary tantrum. She would assume that I'd come crawling back within a few days, checkbook in hand, begging for her forgiveness. She had absolutely no idea how wrong she was. Mrs. Patterson, this is David in account management. I understand you want to discuss your mortgage options. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I want to know what happens if I simply stop making payments entirely. David's voice became more cautious. Well, Mrs. Patterson, if you stop making payments, the account would go into default after 30 days. After that, we would begin foreclosure proceedings, which typically take several months to complete. And during that time, I asked, would the current occupants be able to remain in the house? The occupants would receive legal notices, he confirmed, but yes, they could remain in the property until the process is complete. However, Mrs. Patterson, I have to ask if you've considered the impact this would have on your credit score. I almost laughed out loud, my credit score. As if that mattered when my own daughter had just assaulted me and demanded I give her a $400,000 house for free. David, I interrupted, let me ask you something else. If I were to sell this property instead of letting it go into foreclosure, how would that work? Well, he said, you would list it with a real estate agent. Since there are current occupants, that could complicate things. Do they have a lease agreement? No lease agreement, I said. They are family members who have been living there while I paid the mortgage. I see, he replied. In that case, as the sole property owner on the deed, you have the legal right to sell whenever you choose. You would just need to provide proper notice to the occupants, typically 30 days. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen as the afternoon light began to fade. I had a choice. A slow, painful foreclosure that would ruin my credit but allow them to stay for months, or a clean, swift sale that would force them out in 30 days. My phone buzzed with a text message. Olivia's name appeared and my stomach clenched. I expected another round of abuse or perhaps a fake apology. Instead, the message was short and somehow even more hurtful. We're going out to dinner tonight. Don't expect us to be home if you decide to come by with more drama. Drama, she was calling my refusal to bankrupt myself, my reaction to being physically assaulted, drama. I stared at that message, and something inside me crystallized into cold, hard clarity. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about respect. This was about basic human decency. And most importantly, it was about the fact that my daughter had forgotten that actions have consequences. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in years. "Rebecca," I said when her warm voice answered. "It's Catherine Patterson. I need to discuss selling a property." "Catherine, how lovely to hear from you. What's the property?" "It's the house I bought for my daughter's family 3 years ago," I said, "the one in Maple Heights." There was a shocked silence on the other end. Rebecca knew the whole story. "Catherine," she finally said, her voice full of concern, "what's happened?" I told her everything: the demand, the cruelty, the shoves, the fall, the blood. When I finished, her voice was ice. "She put her hands on you," she stated, not a question. "Twice," I confirmed, then told me to get out. "Catherine, I am so sorry," she said, her voice shaking with anger on my behalf. "Now about this house, are you absolutely sure?" "I'm absolutely certain," I said. "I've already canceled the mortgage payments." "Rebecca, I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I finally understand that enabling Olivia's entitlement isn't helping her, and it's certainly not teaching my grandchildren anything good." "I understand completely," she said. "When do you want to start?" "As soon as possible," I replied. "And Rebecca, Olivia doesn't know. I want this handled by the book, completely professionally, but I also want it to be a surprise." I could almost hear the grim smile in her voice. "Oh, honey," she said, "it'll be a surprise, all right." After we hung up, I felt a sense of relief so profound it was almost dizzying. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't going to wake up tomorrow morning with the heavy weight of Olivia's mortgage payment on my mind. I was going to start living for myself again. And if that meant my daughter had to finally face the consequences of her own choices, then so be it. I made myself a simple dinner and ate it slowly, savoring the quiet of my own home. There were no children's television shows blaring in the background, no phone calls from Olivia complaining about a new expense she expected me to cover. There was just peace and the quiet, satisfying knowledge that tomorrow morning, Rebecca would be driving over to Maple Heights to prepare to list the house that my daughter thought she owned. My phone rang around 8 o'clock that night. Olivia's name flashed on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. But a grim curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Olivia," I said, my voice neutral. "Mom," she began, her tone completely changed. The hostile, aggressive woman from that afternoon was gone, replaced by someone trying to sound calm and reasonable. "I've been thinking about our conversation today. Maybe we were both a little emotional. I think we should talk again tomorrow and work something out." "Work something out," I repeated carefully. "What kind of something?" "Well," she said, "maybe we could do that gradual transition like you suggested. David and I could start taking over some of the payments, and eventually we'd take over completely." I had to suppress a bitter smile. She'd spent the last few hours doing the math. She'd realized that without my monthly check, their perfect life was completely unsustainable. Now she was scrambling, hopping to manipulate me back into my designated role as the family bank. "Olivia, that's an interesting offer," I said, "but I have a question for you." "Okay," she said, her voice hesitant. "Are you planning to apologize for putting your hands on me today?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long, I thought she might have hung up. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was tight with annoyance. "Mom, I think you're exaggerating what happened. We had an argument. Things got heated, but nobody got hurt. I have a bruise on my face and dried blood in my hair from where my head hit the floor, Olivia," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I got hurt." "You're being dramatic," she scoffed. "You barely fell down." And there it was, no apology, no remorse. Just more gaslighting, more dismissal, a complete refusal to acknowledge the violence she had inflicted upon her own mother. Olivia, I said, my voice low and firm, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I will not be making any more mortgage payments on your house. Not next month, not next week, not ever again. Mom, you can't just stop paying, she shrieked, the panic finally breaking through. What about the kids? What about our stability? You should have thought about that, I said calmly, before you put your hands on me and told me to get out of my own property. The conversation was over. I hung up the phone and immediately blocked her number. I turned off my phone entirely and ran myself a hot bath. As I settled into the warm water, I thought about my grandchildren, Leo and Mia. It broke my heart that they would be caught in the fallout, but they were also learning a terrible lesson from their mother, that it was okay to treat the people who love you like a personal ATM. If I kept enabling Olivia's behavior, what was I teaching them about respect and gratitude? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable their worst impulses. Sometimes being a good parent means letting your adult children finally face the consequences of their own choices. Olivia had told me to go away, and I had said okay. What she didn't realize was that when I walked away, I was taking my financial support, her home, and her entire comfortable life with me. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, it exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls from Olivia, 12 from David, a stream of increasingly frantic text messages. I didn't read them, I had an appointment. I met Rebecca at a coffee shop and signed the listing agreement. The for sale sign went up in the front yard of 1247 Maple Heights Drive that Thursday morning. Olivia must have seen it because the calls became hysterical. 30 missed calls turned into 50, then 70. She left voicemails that cycled through every stage of manipulation, from furious, entitled demands to tearful pleas to threats about never letting me see my grandchildren again. David even showed up at my door one evening, his face pale and haggard, but I watched him through the peephole and did not answer. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. By Sunday, Rebecca called me with an update. We have 3 offers, she said, all above asking price. The market was hot, and the beautiful house I had poured my life savings into was a desirable commodity. A week later, a thick envelope arrived by courier. It was a letter from a law firm. Olivia had hired a lawyer. The letter was full of intimidating legal jargon, accusing me of acting in bad faith and threatening to file an injunction to stop the sale. For a moment, my heart seized with panic. But then I took a deep breath and called Rebecca. I read the letter to her over the phone. When I finished, she laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, just a tired, knowing one. Oh, honey, she said, don't you waste 1 second worrying about this. This is a scare tactic, pure and simple. They have no legal standing. There's no lice, you are the sole owner. This letter isn't worth the paper it's printed on. I'll have my attorney send them a little reply that should quiet them down. And just like that, Olivia's last-ditch attempt to bully me failed. She had no power here. The only power she'd ever had over me was the power I had given her. And I had just taken it all back. When I finally answered Olivia's call 2 weeks later, after we had accepted an all-cash offer on the house, her voice was unrecognizable. The anger, the entitlement, the aggression, it was all gone, replaced by the small, broken sound of a child who had finally realized the consequences of her actions. She apologized for everything, she cried. She promised things would be different, that she would be different. She begged me to reconsider, to call off the sale, to give her another chance. But I listened to her pleas and felt nothing but a profound sadness. Apologies that only come when consequences have finally arrived aren't really apologies at all. They're just fear dressed up as remorse. I'm sorry, Olivia, I said quietly, but it's too late. I sold that house for $420,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage and all the fees, I walked away with a check that was large enough to not only replenish my retirement savings, but to secure my own future, a future that no longer involved funding someone else's life. Olivia and her family moved in with David's parents. And last I heard, for the first time in years, both she and David were working full-time jobs. My grandchildren still send me drawings through David's mother, little crayon masterpieces that I hang on my refrigerator. And someday, when they're older, maybe they'll understand why their grandmother had to teach their mother a lesson that love, without respect, isn't love at all. It's just enabling dressed up as affection. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is let them fall. Sometimes saying no is the greatest gift you can possibly give. And sometimes when someone you love tells you to go away, the best and most powerful response is simply to say, okay. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted? Comment below and let me know what city you're watching from. Thanks for listening to my story, and remember, you teach people how to treat you by what you are willing to accept.